Good afternoon if you're in Europe. Good morning if you're here in California with us at BIO. I'm Dwayne Schultes, and I'd like to thank you for joining us on this EBE webinar. We're going to get started here shortly, but before I do, I just want to point out to you some of the webinar tools for those of you listening to interact with us. If you're having any questions or problems, Barbara's going to be moderating. I'm going to be sitting here in the background. I can certainly work with you. Just raise your hand and you and I can chat back and forth. If you're having audio problems, you have the option of switching between the used telephone. We've supplied about 24 international phone numbers for you. Otherwise, you can use the mic and speakers, the Skype setting. And then we'll be taking questions as we go along. Please, there's a questions log. Just submit a question and I'll be keeping an eye on them and I'll try to endeavor to answer those as we can. So with that, I'd like to turn the table over to Barbara Fresheim, the Director of EBE. Barbara, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Dwayne, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. Our topic is broadly accessing the European market, what you need to know and when you need to know it, but we will have in a spotlight on the specifics for cell, gene and tissue therapies, which are fairly new products, but with a great potential to offer cures rather than remedies for complaints. And the topic that we will cover in today's seminar is actually a topic that we will present at the BIO convention here in San Francisco tomorrow. This webinar aims to give an international audience a better understanding on the EU perspectives, as we will do tomorrow here at BIO. It's my honor to present the panelists to you now. After this introduction, I will frame our discussion with a few slides, and then I will give each of the panelists the opportunity to provide perspectives. And after that, we will go in a question and answer mode when you are going to be invited to ask your questions as well. So the first panelist is Jordi Linares. He's the Head of Product Development Scientific Support at the European Medicines Agency in London, and he will be providing insights from the regulator's perspective today. Next up is Lisa Osipenko, the Associate Director of the NICE Scientific Advice Team at the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, of the United Kingdom. And for those of you who are not from Europe, NICE is the health technology assessment body of the UK, and Lisa is responsible for the advanced therapies or cell, gene and tissue therapies. To provide a US perspective on the whole topic, it's my pleasure to welcome Marlene Hafner. She's the Board Vice President of Biopontis Alliance for Rare Diseases. Dr. Hafner previously served as the Director of Orphan Products Development of the Food and Drug Administration of the USA for quite a long time, and basically helped the rest of the world introduce similar programs. So I'm hoping that Marlene can provide a bit of the US perspective and ask questions on why Europe is doing things differently, simply compare it a bit. Last but not least, I welcome Miguel Mulet. He's Director of Strategy and New Projects at TiGenix. And TiGenix is a small European company that actually achieved the first authorization of what Europeans call advanced therapy. It's ChondroSelect, which is a somatic cell product. When I went to university, once your knee was gone, it was gone. Products like ChondroSelect can fix it today. So this is where the innovation in this kind of product is actually lying. Miguel can bring in the company perspective on the challenge to bringing products to market in the current environment. So if we can go to my introductory slides. Europe can seem like a bit of a black box sometimes. Is it one cohesive region or is it many different countries? And on the next slide, using the example of cell, gene and tissue therapies, which we in Europe call advanced therapy medicinal products, or for short advanced therapies or ATMPs, I can reassure you it's a bit of both. and I hope today's discussion will help you gain an understanding of how you can navigate the landscape. So the advanced therapies in Europe are regulated by Regulation 1394 from 2007, and it's an EU-wide regulation. Next slide, please. What that says is that cell, gene and tissue therapies in Europe are subject to the central marketing authorization procedure, meaning Europe is one. Within the EMA, the Committee on Advanced Therapies provides scientific expertise on the assessment of the applications, and it really brings together the best scientific advice in Europe. But then Europe very quickly becomes many again, because the regulation contains a clause for exemption from the need for authorization, and that's the so-called hospital exemption clause. The reason behind that is that sometimes you need to provide specific therapies for very few patients, and this clause allows for that when an advanced therapy is prepared on a non-routine basis, meeting specific quality standards, used in the same member state where it's prepared in a hospital under exclusive responsibility of a medical practitioner, based on an individual prescription for a custom-made product for an individual patient. And these hospital-exempted products are authorized by the competent authorities of the member states, and how shall I put it, we all have different personalities in Europe, so each member state goes about it in a different way. But the regulation also puts down that GMP is required for ATMPs, and it says that even the exempted products need to meet similar quality standards. The regulation aims to ensure free movement of these innovative products in Europe, facilitate access to the European market, foster the competitiveness of European companies whilst guaranteeing a high level of protection for patients. And it actually also contains a number of incentives for small and medium-sized enterprises to go the route of central marketing authorization for the innovative products. The next slide, please. This is a quick look at the drug development process in Europe. It's probably similar the world over, with one exception, and that's the last part on the slide, on the right-hand side. When you go to regulatory approval, because in Europe you're not done with marketing authorization approval, because then you have the health technology assessment and later on reimbursement negotiations, and that's when you're firmly back into Europe is many countries. On the last slide, well, that basically exemplifies the different ways how European countries go about health technology assessment. But that's all I want to say to that one.
We'll be providing a slide rule later.
Exactly, and then you can read it at your leisure. So the last slide is, well, how does Europe compare when you look at the specific of regenerative medicines around the world? And I think the message from that one is we could do better. And today's discussion is also going to be about that. How can we ensure that more companies in Europe are active in the sector and are competitive? And with that, I'm done with framing our discussion. And I would like to hand over to Jordi.
Thank you very much, Barbara. So yes, my name is Jordi Linares. I'm a clinical pharmacologist that has been working at the European Medicines Agency for the last, I would say, 15 years, which is a long time. And I have to start saying thank you to EBE for the invitation to participate in the seminar and also later on into the discussion at BIO. I'll give you a very high-level outlook of how do we support ATMPs, advanced therapies, in terms of access to the EU market, and have been here having the support of Patrick Sellis, for which I'm really grateful. So, as Barbara introduced already, we have a specific regulation in Europe for advanced therapies. that basically sets up the procedure that we will follow with these products to go to marketing authorization. For those products, we follow the centralized procedures. These are what we call products of mandatory scope. That means that they can be authorized in the entire EU in terms of license for marketing authorization after a single assessment by the CHMP. But here what is important is that for these products, because of their very specific characteristics and basically specific benefit risk assessment, we have the scientific opinion of the Committee for Advanced Therapies, the CAT, that will give them advice to the CHMP, which is the licensing committee, that will be the one issuing the opinion that will be sent to the European Commission for then the marketing authorization to be issued. Basically, based on that, we have really the evaluation by two independent teams, one rapporteur and one co-rapporteur, and the co-rapporteur will be always from the Committee of Advanced Therapies. Barbara really said, and I believe that is true, we can do better. That's true. So far we have 7 authorized products that are advanced therapies, 3 gene therapies, 1 cell therapy based, and 3 tissue engineered products. And we have 3 under review so far. And how do we support the marketing authorization, or I would say even the development of these products? We have 2 big pillars of this. One is ATMP classification, the other one is ATMP certification. And here you can see on the second row of the table is the most, I think, important issue, the difference between these 2 procedures that support the development of ATMPs. ATMP classification is about the Committee for Advanced Therapies giving a scientific recommendation on the classification of that product. So basically, we ask companies to come to the agency so we can really look at the product, at its characteristics, and understand if this is a gene therapy, cell therapy, a tissue engineered product, or something else. And sometimes it's something that has to be regulated somewhere else or by somebody else. That depends. In terms of certification, still in the second row, this is really exclusive for SMEs, and that is where Europe is putting a lot of emphasis on helping SMEs. And it's about the Committee for Advanced Therapies giving really a reinforcement of scientific evaluation on the quality and development data of those products, also non-clinical data. Basically, what we expect there is companies to come to the agency, to come to the CAT, to the Committee for Advanced Therapies, and then we can have a look at the data they are producing and give them either advice on that or give them really the certification that they are on the right path. As you can see, both are early interactions that we have with companies with a difference that ATMP certification is exclusive for SMEs. The procedures have different lengths, 60 days for classification, 90 days for certification. And as you can see also, what is an area where I think we need to improve is that we have had more than 150 procedures finalized for ATMP classification, but only 7 for certification. That's something that maybe we need to take a closer look to that and understand why this is happening, because we know that quality issues are very difficult to manage for advanced therapies, and we need to make a bigger effort. Just for information, there you have the link on the slide about the classification procedures that we publish on our website. We give other type of support to developers of advanced therapies through basically scientific advice, which is an incentive that can be as early as possible, but also can be late in terms of development, although we always recommend come early and come often. It's open to all applicants, and for those applicants that are developing advanced therapies, there's a reduced fee with a very much reduced fee for SMEs. Scientific advice is given from the Scientific Advice Working Party, and again in this case is in collaboration with the Committee of Advanced Therapies. So the letters in which we issue that opinion on the development, on the questions that the sponsors have put to us, is sent to the CAT, and the CAT, the Committee for Advanced Therapies, really give the opinion on that. So really you have a reassurance that that advice on development will be then considered by the CAT later when the file is for marketing authorization. And here we have this idea that the scientific advice letter is really consolidated between CHMP, will be the licensing body, and CAT will be then the body that will assess the application and then will go for marketing authorization later. We have, of course, other possibilities to interact between the EMEA and the Committee for Advanced Therapies with sponsors. One that has been very successful is the briefing meetings at the Innovation Task Force, which is a rather informal, in a way, platform for early dialogue on scientific, regulatory, and legal requirements for innovative products. Sometimes we have very, very early discussions there at the level of proof of principle for those products. This is an informal discussion with a non-binding outcome, but it's still pretty informative and I think helpful for companies. In this Innovation Task Force, we have the EMEA staff present there that will take care of the procedure, but also members from committees of the agency and working parties that are relevant for that discussion, and we run either face-to-face or virtual meetings. We also have pre-submission meetings where we can discuss 18 certification, scientific advice, orphan designation, and marketing authorization. I will always try to be quite comprehensive in terms of the discussion in those pre-submission meetings in order for the sponsor to be able to really put together a good package for authorization or certification or whatever the process is. And this is my last slide. I went a bit fast, but I think it's better to have a discussion. And this is about PRIME, which is a new scheme that stands for Priority Medicines that we have recently launched, basically in March at the agency, where we are trying really to reinforce scientific and regulatory advice for any products, but particularly, of course, for advanced therapies because they are really in need of good regulatory advice. PRIME aims at optimizing development and having really robust data generation to have really a good file that is really run through an accelerated assessment without any major issues. Just to clarify, the accelerated assessment is an assessment that runs in a shorter period than the normal assessment for marketing authorization. Basically, it's reduced to 150 days instead of 210, which is the normal assessment time for any marketing authorization. And in the current guideline, we even have the possibility to have shortening to 90 days. Of course, assessing an application in 90, 150 days is a challenge for the committee, for the assessors, and that means that we cannot really have any questions on that file during the assessment. That's why it's so important that the quality of the file is outstanding from the very beginning. Just for information, we have received in the first submission deadline for PRIME 18 products. 4 were accepted into the scheme, and of the 18, we had already 2 advanced therapies in the first submission, and 1 has been accepted as eligible for PRIME. So I think that is good news. So 1 out of 4 initial products that are in PRIME have been accepted, and so it's an ITMP. And just the 2 boxes at the bottom of the slide, they basically inform you about the different stages in which you can apply for PRIME scheme. 1 is very early at proof of principle and is restricted for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises and academia. You can apply for PRIME at proof of principle when you have already a sound pharmacological rationale and really a convincing scientific concept behind the activity of the product. We need to have relevant non-clinical effects of really a magnitude that is sufficient to be considered for the addressing the medical need, and we need already tolerability in first in man. For the proof of concept, which is a door that is open to any sponsors, we need again a sound pharmacological rationale, data really on clinical response with data on efficacy in patients from exploratory trials. We need to understand that the product will bring a substantial improvement to that unmet medical need that we are trying to tackle with this product, and we'll be looking there at the magnitude, the duration, the relevance of the outcomes that will be judged on a case-by-case data. And that's my last slide for me, so give the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Jordi. I think that gives a good idea of what the regulators are doing to make sure that we get cell gene and tissue therapies on the market. But as I mentioned in the introduction, in Europe you then have to go to a health technology assessment, and it's my pleasure to hand over to Lisa, who can tell us about the way NICE goes about looking at these advanced therapies.
Thank you, Barbara. Hello. I'm not as powerful as Jordi. I represent only one of the 28 member state countries, and probably only for the next 2 weeks, but maybe for longer.
We'll ask Titanic
but I'd like to give you the reimbursement perspective, and the situation from that point of view is a lot more complicated because what Jordi presented to you is indeed European perspective, because European Medicinal Agency takes care of the entire 28 member states. When it comes to reimbursement, each member state needs to make their own decision, and each country has a different level of preparation and different level of ability to make such decision, and they have different methodologies. So there are some similarities. All I can do is to give you today the English perspective, and one thing which is probably common across all reimbursement agencies is we have a lot less experience with ATMPs than the regulatory agencies, just because of the nature of product development and the time to market. So far only few products made it into clinical practice, so we are yet to see that pool of products or some proportion of those products coming to us. But regardless how we look at reimbursement or a payer's decision, regardless in which country this is, the question is always benefits and costs. So the idea is to figure out that balance, and countries have very different approaches to that. So NICE has a very formal approach of health technology assessment employing health economic evaluation, and it's a very complicated process. All our meetings are open to public, so you're more than welcome to come and actually watch these meetings in London or in Manchester to know how exactly this is happening. Other agencies mostly look at relative effectiveness and have a different way of setting prices. But for us, this idea of cost and benefits is absolutely pivotal, and there is no special provision for ATMP products. There is no special regulation for ATMP products. They will be looked at the same way as other medicinal products if they're qualified as medicinal products, and 85% of them will be. And another 15% if they're qualified as medtech products, they will be undergoing evaluation via our medtech program if they're topic selected. So there is no guarantee that every product that receives licensing from EMA or that receives CE mark somewhere in Europe will definitely undergo NICE evaluation. So, but for medicinal products, it's highly, highly likely that most of them will go through evaluation at NICE. So, as I said, there will be a proportion of products that might undergo, go directly to NHS England, which is representative of the actual NHS system. So what NICE does is we don't set prices, we provide a recommendation decision whether the product should be reimbursed by the National Health Service or not. There's a free pricing market. And of course, when it comes to cell and gene therapies, it's a very complicated landscape because we rarely see long-term outcomes, and there's huge uncertainty when it comes to decision-making on pricing because the claims that companies make in terms of curative attempts, they're not substantiated by the evidence. So we as payers need to take a significant risk on deciding to reimburse these products, but at the same time, we need to take these risks in order to enable market access to these products. So there is a very important movement within NICE, within the English system and within all HTAs trying to think, how can we do this? How can we manage these risks efficiently so we provide access, but at the same time we protect taxpayers' money in case the product doesn't work, in case the product stops working. So this is under development, and this is very interesting discussion. So if the product is not recommended by NICE or it doesn't go through NHS England, as long as the product is licensed, it will be available to patients in Britain via private care. But because we have a centralized healthcare system, of course the attempt of any company is trying to be reimbursed through a centralized system. And I just wanted to summarize our efforts to date in the ATMP space. And for evaluation, we've had only one completed appraisal for Prevent, which was not recommended based on cost effectiveness, and the report is available online for you to see the details why it was a negative recommendation. Hunter Selecto, which Miguel will talk in a moment, had an appraisal at NICE a long time ago, and it was not recommended, and currently the appraisal is ongoing, but it's not just for this product, it's actually for a number of similar products where Hunter Select is one of them, and it's called multiple technology appraisal. So I cannot comment on that. All documents which are in progress, publicly available, are online, but we're looking forward towards this decision, towards these committee meetings to look at the outcomes. There are 3 other products which were topic selected and will be undergoing evaluation at NICE, and there are 18 products in the topic selection pipeline. It doesn't mean they're all going to go through NICE, because they might not even get the license, or they might not succeed in their phase 3 trials, but they are in our horizon and they might end up in evaluation. We have a lot more interaction with ATMP developers through our scientific advice, and I had this program, so I've seen through all these products, and we've completed advice on 12 products. Most of them were through the parallel procedure with European Medicines Agency and a number of other HTA agencies. For us, it was an absolutely fascinating experience, and I'd like to say thank you to the companies that were brave enough to bring those products to us. There were a number of questions where I don't think we managed to provide very useful answers to the companies, but these questions triggered very important steps for us within the system to go back and to our evaluation programs and to say we're not prepared to answer these questions. We need to commission further research. We need to be able to communicate with industry. We need to think about these managed access schemes. So whilst on clinical program, we, I think, competently helped companies on the reimbursement level. We were grateful for these difficult questions we were unable to answer at that stage. And we have further bookings from these companies. We also have discounts for SMEs, so we very much look forward to further dialogues. The problem with smaller companies, and actually sometimes with top 20 pharma, is they're not aware about all these tools that they can use, about the adaptive pathway palette, about PRIME, about scientific advice from HTA agencies, from EMA agencies, and this is very important to try to have this dialogue, to try to talk to us, because no matter what, many companies think that there's nothing more important than the license, but in the reality there's nothing more important than getting your product to patient. And if you haven't spoken to payers, this is a delay, this is frustration, because when you bring your product without relevant evidence, and I've just explained the risks that we're facing in these decisions, making decisions for taxpayers' budgets, ensuring that these things are taken into consideration during the development is extremely, extremely important. So one other thing I'd like to highlight is, because of the scientific advice questions, because of all the issues raised, and actually ATMP has been extremely high up on the UK research agenda, not just within NICE, but within clinical research, within Office for Life Sciences, a mock appraisal was commissioned at NICE. Basically what they've decided to do is to say, okay, let's imagine we have this product coming to NICE, let's have a committee meeting and see how we would make decisions about this, because they selected quite a different product from Prevent, and it was a treatment for CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And they modeled 2 scenarios, one as a bridge therapy to stem cell transplant, and another as a curative attempt. And yes, it was made up data. They made up scenarios in terms of how many patients were in cohorts, and they how they set up prices, but still it turned out to be a very useful experience, and this report is also available online. One conclusion from this appraisal is that NICE methods for ATMPs are fit for purpose to evaluate these cell and gene therapies, so we will not be introducing the methodologies, we will not be providing specific frameworks. It also identified that novel payment methods are needed, so this is something that needs to be developed in collaboration with Department of Health, with NHS England, with all other stakeholders, and especially with the industry. And they did find a very interesting methodological issue in terms of discount rate having a very specific impact on reimbursement decisions. So, but in interest of time, I'll leave these details out, and you're more than welcome to read this report online. We are commissioning further academic work for reimbursement and managed access models. We're running workshops for developers of cell and gene therapies. The next one will be in Boston on the 7th of July, and then we'll have one in London on the 12th of October, but do contact me if you have questions. And I'll stop here and answer your questions after.
Thank you very much, Lisa. If I could hand over to Marlene then. How does that compare to what can be done in the US, and what are your thoughts on the topic?
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Dwayne. It's a pleasure to be with you today. The U.S., not surprisingly, does things their own way. And it is slightly, well, considerably different than is done throughout Europe. All cell and gene therapy fall within the purview of the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research, CBER. CBER issued their first guidance concerning cell and gene therapy only in June of 2015, so exactly 1 year ago. That doesn't mean that there weren't things happening in that space prior to that. There certainly were. But it's a new area in the United States. I do not know the exact number of applications for various cell and gene therapies that we have had, but not quite so many as has occurred to the EMA. FDA is very cautious in this regard. If you go to the website, if you go to fda.gov and then you type in cell and gene therapy, you will find a myriad of guidances in addition to the main guidance, and there's a tremendous amount of information there, good information. They are guidances, they are not regulations. If you look at cell and gene therapy in 2016, many of the products that are coming down the road are orphan products. Orphan products have been at the forefront of many early therapies. Many of them actually will qualify once they are applied for as breakthrough therapies because they will be really a very different kind of therapy, perhaps even a curative therapy, than we have seen heretofore in the U.S. or anywhere else. We're just our steps forward in science at the present time are very, very rapid. FDA is very concerned about risks of this kind of therapy. Every FDA approval is done based on risk-benefit, but early studies of gene therapy, as everyone knows, I think, resulted in some leukemias due to malinsertion in some of those patients, and so, once burned, super careful. We're concerned about what long-term effects will be, what immunogenicity of the product is, how long will the product really last? Will it be a lifetime, or will it be a finite period of time? These are live products. They have a dynamic nature. It's not quite the same as a straight piece of chemistry. Sometimes patients need to be pre-treated with immunomodulating therapy, which puts them at another kind of a risk. So all of these sorts of things are being considered within the FDA when a company comes to them. CBER is very good at providing scientific advice. They enjoy working with the company in the process of developing a product. And I would encourage you to contact FDA as soon as you think you are going to be bringing a product to the market in the United States. We have a statement that we say during times of voting, vote early and vote often, which is kind of important right now. But I would encourage you to contact FDA early and often. It will be to your benefit. And as I said, seek orphan product designation. Once you have clinical data, and you need clinical data, you can apply for breakthrough therapy. Whether some of your products might be able to qualify for pediatric voucher designation is going to depend very much on the therapy and how it is used. We do have a centralized procedure. I often say the only thing that we have that is older in the U.S. than it is in Europe is a United States. So we work closely with our European counterparts, and EMA has people permanently assigned at the FDA, and FDA has people permanently assigned at the EMA. They're all knowledgeable people. They're good to work with. They're easy to work with, and I encourage you to contact them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marlene. Miguel, what does a company make out of all of this?
Thanks, Barbara. The first thing that came to mind when I was looking at your slides was how the problem is framed today versus how it would have been framed, say, 10 years ago, in the sense that the slide that you showed at the end with all the different countries and all their HTA approaches, a similar slide would have been shown 10 years ago at the beginning of the presentation with the EMA at the end of the presentation. Because sometimes we forget what Europe has been able to achieve in homogenizing criteria and minimizing those differences that each country legitimately has. So my first point is that for a company what has been very useful is that now we have a one-stop shop in terms of regulatory advice to which we can go, that now has clearer and improving processes through which you can go, and which benefits from something that is also in the fragmented slide, which is that from each country we can get the very best experts. And I think that allows us to have a dialogue with a variety of people that may have different views, but from which we, the institution can bring the best expertise. So although it's seen as a challenge, I think we need to turn it around and see the added value of the work that has been done over these years. There are still challenges left, even within how EMA operates, but I don't think they are different from any large organization. And those things, like with Prime, are being solved. And in terms of HTA, that is still an open issue. There are very different views across Europe of how medicine should be accessed. I think there is a question that underlies all that, which is about innovation versus gatekeeping of the market. But on the other hand, I think the fact that there is NICE and that there are also other approaches enriches the debate. And
shouldn't forget that at the end of the day, once a drug is in the market, we all know that prices are likely to converge for different pressures, and maybe what we should consider is whether that convergence, rather than happening as a consequence, could be foreseen before, because our problem is not one of living up to the game, but of what we cannot be asked is that we crystal ball the future. So as much uncertainty is removed from this process, the better development we can do and the better value we can offer to the patients at the end. So that's basically our view of the situation.
Thank you very much. I mean, you basically addressed already one of the questions I had to the panel, and that's how does the European market differ from what it used to be? And I find your insights specifically very valuable. Do the others have any comments on that? I can tell you some of my view, but I've been too short in that industry to really make it worthwhile, because I've only been with EBE for 1 year, so I'd be inclined to concur with Miguel, but Jordi or Lisa, what do you think? You go ahead.
Well, this is Jordi again. If there's anything I would like to highlight, are two comments from Lisa and Miguel. One is that really, yeah, we have walked a long way since the previous situation of total, I wouldn't call it chaos, but non-coordination.
Yeah.
So we need to understand where are we. I agree, there's a lot to be done, and particularly with Lisa's comment also that in Europe, marketing authorization is not access to patients. We need to have this very clear that there's another step for which we need very early dialogue, coordinated approach from regulators both at HTA level, at medicine regulation level, in order for companies to be able to generate the data they will need for our assessments to run as smoothly as possible, even though we can have a negative opinion, yes, but at least we need that data to be generated in a I would say, a timely fashion. And I think that that's now the new challenge we have. It's not new, but okay, the last challenge we have in order to make possible that those good products go to the market, to the patient, I would say, as soon as possible. And that, for me, will be that only we talk. We come together into meeting rooms discussing cases, and then taking at least advice together. But that's my personal view.
I think from a reimbursement perspective, one thing to keep in mind that 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have HTAs, or they were just starting, and we didn't have ATMPs, so, or at least not anywhere close to the reimbursement decisions. That's why what we're starting now is actually starting point. So maybe not this year, but maybe 2 years ago, but this is the beginning, so it didn't start in 10 years ago. But what's important is that we practiced on other technologies a lot, and we learned a lot from orphan products, we learned a lot from ultra-rare diseases, we learned a lot from public health issues, and all this knowledge can be very effectively applied. And as Jordi said, this collaboration we've practiced on all other products, so we have the processes sorted out. Now putting the methods together and putting this all stakeholder involvement, that industry has their voice, patients have their voice, reimbursement agencies as well as regulatory agencies can build that path together, and there is an exit strategy for the company on time, there's an exit strategy for the regulatory decision on time, and there's an exit strategy for reimbursement.
I've got a question come in from Tweeter. I've got a tweeted question for you folks, believe it or not. And it's talking about, there was a presentation a couple days ago here at BIO that orphan drugs now have a 25% success rate of approvals. And the question is, are we concerned that with the amount of ATMPs going into orphans, that there will be a reaction against the orphan legislation due to cost and volume? So that's the question that was tweeted in from a client of Vital Transformation interested in EBE. There's a hard question for the panel. Here we go. We've teed it up. Let's go.
Was this 25% success rate in the U.S.?
It's global.
Global.
It was BioTracker report, the new one that was just released, 9,000 clinical trials.
Fascinating.
Really interesting study. I have a copy in my bag. I'll happily share it. So.
I think that there is concern about the cost of drugs, period, in the U.S. Once you have approval, you almost always have reimbursement for much of your drug product. Not always, but
In the U.S.
in the U.S. I'm only talking about the U.S. That's both good news and bad news, depending on how you look at it. The cost of drugs, and when I say drugs, I'm including these advanced therapies, has been going up. Advanced therapies are going to be, already are, very expensive. Biotech products are very expensive. I do think that sometimes the expense of a product gets laid on the back of an orphan product, whereas it's not only because it's an orphan. You've got economies of scale. You have not evaluated, or the complainant has not evaluated the cost of the development of the drug for that size market. We haven't taken into account what it costs to keep that product in the market and do the kind of post-marketing surveillance that needs to be done, which is expensive. How will this work vis-a-vis orphans? Oh my, I don't have that crystal ball. If you ask me in 10 years, I can look back to today and say, well, I should have known.
Well, we're recording this, so we'll be
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much. There's no good answer to that.
Yeah.
But I do think there is a pushback in the U.S. on some costs of therapies.
What about the EU?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this from the EU point of view. In fact, I don't want to do any advertisement, but that's my last slide of a session that I have a bio on Thursday. No, because I think there's concern in Europe. There's concern. The national health systems are currently under a lot of stress because of the high price of products in general, but in particular of orphan drugs. And there are budgets that are struggling really to accept the prices that companies are asking for, and sometimes, and I will be blunt here, without really a very strong evidence on the benefit of those products for patients. So that's something that is there, and I know from different discussions at the European Commission and with different member states that there's now a willingness to look at those incentives for orphan drugs, because basically orphan drugs are incentivized through development by public money. So the feeling from some member states is that the society is paying twice for those products, and that is really an issue.
I think there's two issues here for any company embarking in this area to think through, and that is that not all orphan products are the same. Our product CX601 is an orphan product, has nothing to do with those that are used to treat infants with very severe diseases. So you have to think about the product first, and then whether it's an orphan or not, it's a different discussion.
Absolutely.
Secondly, I think with this kind of news, we are sparking a orphan product bubble. And like all bubbles, it will reach a point where we will reach a limiting factor. And Jordi was already pointing out that the limiting factor is obvious, that there is a limited budget, and it will only be stretched as much as it can go. Even if the population of patients is small, you have lots of applications, and from an HTA perspective, you will have to decide, first of all, how much is the willingness to pay. On the other hand, whether that added value that is promised is common across all the products that will be coming through, because fortunately for the patients, many of the ones that are coming through are very impressive. But the rest that come in the future, with all the funding that they're likely to attract, will have to live to that expectation. If they do, then they should deserve access. Otherwise, we will have to moderate the enthusiasm that is based on a statistic that is only one point on which to base a decision. So I would be cautious, or rather cautious. I would really study more in depth what are the diseases, what are the product profiles, and what is it that we are actually going to put in the market.
Is it also part of the problem that it's a question of who pays and where the reimbursement. I mean, if you're putting a cure in the market, if you're putting a cure out there, how are you going to be able to annuitize the actual cost? I mean, you have to be able to, because often the person who pays is not the person who gets the benefit.
I'd like to start on that one because this is a very common argument the company brings, saying that they invented a cure. We don't know about this. This is the claim based on a very short trial because companies cannot afford to follow up patients for a long time. So something that looks like cure based on blood tests might not be the final cure. So, and this continued evidence generation is absolutely key, whether this is orphan products, ATMPs. So, and this is responsibility of the industry, but not only. This is also, whether it's European national responsibility, but supporting industry, creating access to registries, maybe joining some platforms for this evidence generation, making it easier and cheaper is extremely important, because unless we keep reiterating this evidence, and it is of huge interest to the industry itself to keep proving that this is indeed cure or the benefit is maintained. So this is something where a lot of effort, a lot of investment needs to go, and that will guide reimbursement decisions, because the product should be continued reimbursed as long as it delivers, and that is the key issue. It's a wordplay in terms of what is a cure and what a static model that we used to have here in the product. And here's the decision. We should be moving into the fluid model. This is the evidence we're getting, and this is how much we're willing to pay for it. So adjusting in real time to that.
And what do you think ultimately then are the other HTAs thinking? Are they in the same boat?
I think very much so. From the joint meetings that we've had, and Miguel said we're all facing exact same problems. Budgets are very tight. Decisions for these products are complicated, and this risk-sharing schemes are very much needed. And I think what would simplify the system in Europe, because we will not move into pan-European HTA framework, at least in the time I can possibly foresee. But one thing we can do is probably create these joint schemes which would be agreeable to all the countries, and then industry can take them like off-the-shelf products and negotiate prices and negotiate access within each specific country based on specific national criteria.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time for our webinar, and basically I think we have time for one more question. And for me, the question would be, for a small company with products in development, what are really the key elements of a strategy to ensure that getting the product to market and ensuring favorable marketing environment? And who would like to start on that one?
I guess I am the small company.
Yes, you are indeed, Miguel.
So I think the short answer is that what we need to do is to talk a lot to people like Jordi and Lisa, and make sure we can reduce the uncertainty and understand what are the specifications that we want to meet. I think in general in this business versus others in which you are innovating, the problem is that you just have one shot at doing it right, and you have a lot of uncertainty about other criteria that in other markets you can start factoring into development early on, like price, like what the specification should be, and in this case it's a process of discovery. And the only solution that I can think is that we can continue having this conversation and understanding what are your requirements so that they can be fulfilled, with the understanding that if we do produce something that fixes a problem, it will be adequately rewarded, and that we can keep our shareholders happy.
If I can make just 2 points here very briefly. One would be, for us regulators, the message to small, medium-sized enterprises is often come early. That's very important. The second one is that we like to talk to companies and give advice. Will be situations where we give you a bit of work to do. But it's better that this work is done and is done right than being late and then having really a development program that has really wasted time, effort, and patience. So that's really something we need to avoid.
I would just suggest that at the very beginning, you should know your product. You should know what you expect it to do and how you expect it to act, and know what your endpoints are going to be. Because strangely enough, that is not always the case.
I completely concur to all the points that were just said, so call us and we'll have first chat on the phone, and then we'll see if you're in the right point in your development program to come and discuss your product with us. If you're not, we'll tell you when is the best time. For SMEs, it's very difficult to understand the idea of scientific advice. They don't know how to phrase questions. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't understand the paradigm of the reimbursement of a payer. So this is the reason to actually give us a call, and this is free, and it's an opportunity to prepare in the best way possible.
Yeah, just to say one very last thing, we will go there and listen to you. The other thing that we would ask is that you also listen to us. So there are some things that can be improved. Hospital exemption, for example, is a key situation that if we had the right appropriate dialogue, maybe we would have come to a solution for everyone. So I think it has to also work both ways, and we'll go to see you as often as we can.
Great. With that, I would like to thank you on the webinar for listening to us today, and I would like to thank even more all the panelists for the contributions. I hope we have given you some pointers on what to do if you want to come to Europe with an advanced therapy, and if not, come and ask us. And I think all of the panelists, and decidedly EBE, would be happy to help you along your way and point you in the right directions. And so thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening.